My name is Nick Noyes. I'm the husband of the president of the Friends of Taunton Bays. That's my claim to fame. I sent out all kinds of invitations to friends and family. And I think I see a few here, but some new faces too, so thanks for coming. The first part of this program was to orient you to loading and setting up and preparing for a kayak and a canoe trip. And since the weather is not cooperating, we moved this was going to be on the grass out front, so we moved this inside. And I just wanted to share with you some of the canoe things that I've developed over the years that facilitate handling a big canoe. And the older we get, the more we really need to have two people start moving things around. And this is a setup that we have. It's a caravan. We've had a caravan for a number of years. And we have a Yakima system. And these are a setup for kayaks. And I paralleled that with a setup for my canoe. That's a 17-foot Penobscot. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was the kayak. To facilitate getting that onto your car, you can buy the Yakima system. There's others that are easy loaders. They drop down and you just plop it on there and it comes right up. Those get very expensive. But this is an easier way to get your kayak up on top of your vehicle. And this is toward the back of the vehicle. These are rollers, and I've spaced them so that the rollers will spread the weight across the kayak. And what Alice and I do, or if I'm there by myself, I'll first get the kayak to the back of the car with a device like this. How many of you have something like this? So maybe not all of you are familiar with that. What this does is it helps one person move your kayak from a rack to your vehicle. And I'm going to back up one more step. If you want to create a boat rack that's conducive to making it easy to move your boats, what I've done, and I'd be happy to share that plan with you, used a number of 10-foot 2x4s, pressure treated, and they're bolted together, and at the height, so that the top, I have two levels, and this top boat, especially the canoe, which is weighing about 50, 60 pounds, I can tuck in underneath the boat and stand up with the center thwart of the boat on my shoulders. I come up and you're using your legs to lift that weight. It's very easy. And then I can just step out from the rack. So the rack is measured, and for me, to be able to get under it, Ed would probably have to be a little bit taller. But once you have it on your shoulders, you haven't really had to bend down and lift it up. If you're going to get a canoe on your shoulders, single person, so the canoe is on the rack and it's almost shoulder high, you can stage that and create the rack to do that. Once you have it, you step underneath it, you have it on your shoulders, then I walk around to the vehicle, and before you recognize this thing right here, this is a 1/2-inch galvanized pipe, plumbing pipe. And it just so happens that fits perfectly into the Yakima tubes system. So I slide this tube in to the bow of the canoe where the canoe is going to rest, and now I have the canoe on my shoulders, and I walk around, and again, one other staging is I have a pad on the ground where the canoe, the stern tip is going to land, and I'm going to drop the canoe on this bar. And then I'm going to scooch down, and I'm going to leave the stern stem band on a pad to protect it. I'll step away, I'll come over and then pick up the stern. It's being balanced in place and it's being held away from the other bar. So this second rack now is sticking out here, and I'm going to lift that up and I'm going to slide that over and on. Then I've positioned these racks so that they line up with the thwarts of the canoe. And the thwart is the cross piece. You're seeing a kayak here, but a canoe has usually 2 or 3 cross pieces or thwarts. If you have these lined up with your rack, then when you tie it in place, I think if you look closely, this right here is a side clamp with the Yakima system. So the first thing I do is I loosen this up and I slide that clamp tight up against the boat. And I've actually removed the pipe from the tube. You don't need that now. And this will push in and tighten down, and now you have a good solid anchor for this side of the boat, and that's offset by an anchor on the opposite gunwale. Then you go back and you do the same thing on your stern mounting, and right away you've created a lot of stability. And the second thing, the thwarts here are lined up pretty close with your rack. This is the rack bar. The next thing is with the straps. I use 12-foot. These are a little bit shorter for the kayak. But these racks the straps are set up so that there's no knot tying or whatever, and you're fit together with, the end goes through and tightens down. But what I'll do is, and this would have been easier to show in the process, but if you start in the middle of the boat, of the car, I reach underneath the car and I drop this over the bar, and I pull this other side all the way in so that it's wrapped around the bar, and what I have now then is the 2 ends of this wrapped around the bar, and I'm in front of this support, and I stretch it out and I loop one end over the bow, and I then loop the other end over the bow. And what that means is I can pull these tight to the top of the canoe. And this anchor clamp I will leave like right there on the canoe. The other side comes down, and I wrap that around the bar, and then I wrap it as much as I need to use up the excess around the thwart and the rack bar. And now I can bring that back up through here and anchor it really well and tie that down. Does everybody follow that? It's a lot easier if we were outside and I could show it to you. And then on the stern is actually a lot easier because you can just stand on your rear bumper, your rear fender, and you can drop this over the bar that's going across. You can pull it back towards you, reach up, do the same thing. Throw both pieces over the canoe, and this is the other end now, and you're doing the same thing here. Wrapping the second thwart with the canoe support, and then anchoring it tight. The one other thing I wanted to explain to you about using the canoe too. They are heavy, and it's really hard for one person to be getting it up there. I can do that with the bar, and then walk around. But when you've finished your trip, you have your boat out of the water, you're really then having to get that up onto your shoulders, or you're, pulling it along back to the car. Another way to use two people to manage that would be to lay down. I'm just going to make believe this is a little blanket again, or you throw a towel down. You just put your towel down here, and the two of you, and this is a canoe now, not a kayak, the two of us will turn the boat over on the ground, or we'll pick up the stern, we'll turn it over so that the bow is now on the ground, okay? And you have two people holding this end of the canoe. And then, Alice, what would you do next?
I pick up the other end.
Well, we're at this end, so.
You're at that end, so I pick up this end. He tells me what to do.
Let's make believe this is the canoe.
So this is down here.
And I'm standing here with this.
And it doesn't weigh very much at all. And then we walk along like this. Whoops. On the camera.
So if this were the canoe, the two of us would have worked together to lift this up onto our shoulders, onto my shoulders and Alice's too. And then she would just walk forward, pick that up, and just put that on her shoulder, and then you could walk a long ways. And then once you get to your vehicle, Alice, we would put the rod, the galvanized pipe, in the thing, and she would just walk up, pop that on the rod, come around, and the two of us would pick it up, slide it on, and then go through the anchoring. Do you follow that? If you aren't working together, another way to do that is for both of you to get down, and there's the way that you would pick up your canoe is you stand here like this, like you're going to be carrying it, and then you reach down and you extend your left hand to the far side of the thwart, and you would both pick up the canoe, put it on your thigh, and then the two of you say 1, 2, 3, and you kick with your thigh, and your legs are stronger, and boop, it comes up and you drop it on your shoulders, and the two of you walk off. We'd be doing this outside if we could with the canoe.
That galvanized pipe, does that go into any device or just to the one you have?
It just so happens that it fits inside the Yakima system.
Oh, it's for the, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Could
And
you use it with another, just place it down, or that has to fit in?
you probably have to find something that might fit. If you have the Thule system, maybe a square or rectangular bar, you might be able to find a bar that would fit in there. And it basically just slides in. It's the staging that you have to get the boat up, level with the top of the car, and then two of you put it over and slide it on in place. Any questions about canoes? I was going to talk more about that and actually demonstrate that, but with the weather, I think I'd like to move probably to the kayak at this point. So your kayak is going to be on the rack. The two of you could come pick it up, but if you're there by yourself, there's another handy tool which is available. Everything's available for the right price, but this is fairly inexpensive. It's maybe in the $60 range, but it fits. Anybody seen this before? Okay, so we're gonna. The kayak is on the ground or on your rack, and basically this is made to facilitate getting your kayak from point A to point B with just one person. So it's made so that it slips underneath the bottom of the keel area. It's going to snug up to some point where it won't go any farther. And you reach forward and you anchor it. I think I was anchoring it to one of these spots here. in reality, it's usually going to be back a little farther. Once that's up in the air, you can then walk around. You pick up your handle here, and you can roll that boat very easily from your rack to your car or whatever. When we get to the vehicle, we do the same thing. Now we have the rollers. Remember the rollers I showed you? It's a matter of Alice will typically stabilize one end. I put a blanket to protect the car, but we pick this up, and we can take the rollers off before we do this, but we pick this up and we drop it on the rollers on the top of the vehicle. Stabilized, Alice is holding it. Then you walk back and you can, this has come off now. So it's sitting on the rollers. You pick this up and you push it forward into the saddles. The front end is going to have two saddles which are adjusted to fit the width of this boat. And then the anchoring works the same way. You get your strap, and if this will actually show you what I'm talking about with the straps. You go under the rack, you bring it back over here, you position this so that you have some room to pull it tight. You're going to bring this down underneath the bar, wrap it around maybe a couple of times to use up your slack, and then reach up. You slide this through the locking mechanism, and then lay to it, suck that right down on. This is the bar of our rack, but that's the idea that I was getting at with the canoe. So the same thing with the canoe. So once you have your canoe on your car, you probably want to think about, I put the boats on cockpit side up. On a day like this, you're going to get water inside. So another accessory is a cockpit cover. And these are specified to fit a certain circumference. There's like a 3219, and you measure it this way and this way. So this is like 19 inches. I'm going to say this is 30 inches, but the manufacturers will match the cockpit cover to your boat. And before, if we were going on a trip with the kayaks, I would be putting this on, and it's made to cover tightly. I won't necessarily do the whole thing, but it stretches, and it stretches tight. Seal is a good manufacturer, Cockpit Seal. This is it says it's a 1.7 ratio, and that's those two measurements that you make will make that work. Well, it's not really all that critical, but you can see that it goes on fairly tightly. The important thing, though, is if you don't have this, you should add a little bit of rope and tie that into one of your guides there. Otherwise, that could lift off, and then you're out probably $30.
Pick it up on the way home.
Yeah. So there, yeah, so no, it's his windshield. So this pretty much has us, the kayak on the car, and the reverse is basically undo your straps, have some help, but you're going to pick up the bow, slide it back, and say as Alice is sliding this back, I catch the bow and drop it down, keep from scratching the car. The other thing to consider when you're buying a kayak is that you really should have 2 flotation chambers. These are airtight, and if you see these, they're also tethered. So if it pops off while you're on a trip or something, you won't lose it. This particular kayak has a rudder system, and there are foot pedals inside, and they work well. You can match your foot, your leg length, and the rudder can really compensate when you have a wind coming one way and perhaps a tide going the other, and you can adjust this rudder so that you compensate for the push of the current or the push of the wind, and instead of you always having to work real hard to keep it going straight, this will keep you going straight and narrow. Yeah, some of the earlier kayaks, they were made of fiberglass, and there was no flotation unless you installed a balloon, a bladder. And it would be shaped so you could cram that in there, and then you physically blow it up, and you create buoyancy and a bladder in the bow, and then there's one in the stern. As long as these are on tight, they're going to give you buoyancy. And if you tipped over, if you had just one of these, what's going to happen? Your boat's going to be sitting straight up and down in the water, or either way. The other piece of equipment that before we take off now, so we're going to take our kayak off the car. You usually have to, cuss and swear a little bit because someone drops the boat in the process. And the thing that's the most important thing is your paddle. And if you notice, if you don't have a tether for your paddle, you ought to rethink that, because you can buy a device that's going to keep this from floating away. And you kind of just stick it in here till you get the boat in the water, and we're going to just latch that there. No matter what happens, you tip it over, you forget, it falls out of your hands, you're in a big wind, it's going to be right there. You're going to be able to retrieve that. Oh yeah, you can buy these. I'm not sure. I have such a big collection. All the boats are Old Town. Most of them have been Old Town boats. The other thing you can do, though, with your paddle is you can set it up. If you look at these, there's 3 adjustments here. One is the blades are both flat. They're the same in the same plane. The other is that you have a little offset, like a 15-degree offset. And the technique when you're paddling is typically to hold and manage the paddle with one hand, and you're going to let it float in your other hand. So this is set up for me, and it's set up with the angle going 15 degrees this way, and that means I can take a stroke forward, and the paddle is kind of slicing through the air. It's not creating resistance in the wind. As you come back, you see I've turned it with my right hand, floated here, and I'm now paddling with my left hand, and I'm slicing through the air. So the wind resistance can be pretty significant. It's surprising, but if you had that option with the paddle, it would be good to set it up the way you're the most comfortable. And as I say, basically hold the paddle with one hand and just let your other hand guide it and rotate it. When it's in the right position, then you pull, and then you turn it back.
Does it make any difference if you're left-handed or right-handed?
It's really more what you're comfortable with. You can try it both ways. Well, some of our paddles just have 2 settings. They're both either straight or offset I think the way I am right now. It's funny, this paddle actually has a taper to it, which kind of lends itself to setting it up this way, at least for me. The other thing is these are drip protectors. So if you position them close to your hands, as your paddle comes up, you're not going to get water dripping down into your cockpit. So those are all little subtle things that go with paddling. And it's good to match your paddle to the boat size. A bigger boat is going to need a wider paddle. A bigger person would probably have a wider reach. A smaller person could have a slightly smaller. If I were in the sales, I'd probably know all those specifics, but you ought to just, when you buy the paddle, consider that as well. Match that to the boat.
And I know the nice wide blade, so you get some good power.
And it can come apart. You can unsnap this and take it apart for transport. The other thing to when you're buying a kayak, and we can look at this later, but the seat, the comfort has just improved 100%. You can adjust the back. You can raise and lower the seat. You can move it into the right position here. There's some options here for your knees, and you can't. I can tip this a little bit. Can you see the seat? This is it has adjustments to how far back it comes. And then these are knee adjustments here, so a smaller person can move that back, and your knees are going to hold you in place. Okay, thanks, Vanna. So now we have the kayak ready to go. Are we ready to go? No. Okay, good. That was the right answer. So in your little kayak kit, before you get in the water, this is a safety package that's available from I think this one's from Beans. But what you've added to your contingent, your arsenal of equipment now, is a pump, and it's got your name on it. So when you lose it, someone might return it. And before I forget about it, recently the Water, Fish, and Game have put a plea out for people to add a nameplate to their boats, especially their kayaks and canoes, because they will find a kayak floating in the bay somewhere, and it may have been washed ashore by somebody leaving it on the water, or it may be that person had flipped and they're out, in danger or maybe at risk of drowning. So this has Alice and Nick Noyes, 45 Dwelly Point Road, and our phone number. So if this is found, they can call right away and say, "Are you in trouble? Is it okay?" Or so.
Did you just use tape for that and indelible ink?
What I did is I bought some special tape, which is made for outdoor weather stripping. The State Department actually will give you a tag if you approach. I think Augusta is the closest place that had them. I was looking for getting those, and that would be probably indelible markers on a stick-on fishing and wildlife type sticker. Those are available free if you get to the right spot.
Where do you go to get it?
I think it's the
Fishing Game?
Fish and Game, yeah. If you see a warden, they may even have some in their truck.
So, Nick, is that made to rip off so they can just take it with them?
No, it's made to stay on your boat. And really, if anything happens,
Just cheap out magic marker.
yeah. It would be just, does it fade? Is it still there when you need it? And I'm just kind of testing this on our boats and see how long it lasts. Okay, what's the other thing that's on this guy? Another tether. And that's as simple as, this is something I made up. It's a stiff on cloth, and I just tied a bowline, and it's made so that you can go through that hole. And what I typically do is leave that right there. before I get into this, I'm going to touch on a couple more points. This, however, this whole bag is set up to be parked right here in the cockpit behind the seat. And this is my security system here. This is maybe a quarter-inch cable, galvanized cable. These are ferrules, and they're crimped closed. And this is crimped to the brace that holds the seat. These kayaks now are running in the thousands of dollars. So if you want to secure them, rather than maybe run something through here or through there, anybody with a pocket knife has access to that, and it's not a really big damaging thing. If you have a canoe, I run the cable through the lifting grips on the very bow and the stern. So if someone is going to damage the canoe to take it, they're really going to do a lot of damage. So they would discourage somebody. More keeping people honest rather than. So this I have in place, and what I recommend everybody is that you have a little eye clasp, and now you have this secondary safety thing, and I'll talk about that later. But it's going to be there when you need it. Okay. Before you get in your boat, and Alice, I'm going to talk about the regular-looking life jackets. It is required to have a life jacket. I would recommend that you wear it when you are in the boat, especially on the water. If you're looking for one, rather than a full-body life jacket, I've found that and we like these, this was our second stage life jackets. You can see that they're a little shorter, they're more up here, but they should fit tightly, and they are made so that the flotation is compressed upward, and when you're in this cockpit, if this is against the back of your seat for several hours, you kind of get pretty uncomfortable. Over the years, if you watch for Hamilton Marine, they often will have a sale on these, but we've moved to a life jacket that meets the Coast Guard requirements, and it doesn't fit as tightly as those do, but for our purposes, well, there we go. She has to take care of me all the time. Someone else was using this, not me. Yeah, now you can buy these so that they're automatically inflated, and I would not recommend that they be automatically inflated, or you can blow them up yourself, and they have a backup automatic inflation. So this thing you can wear, if you look, you can be tucked into this seat. There's no big life jackets pushing you out of the way, and it's really made so that when it does inflate, this is what it looks like. And this is the inflation. That comes off, and you just, when you're done using it, it just releases itself. And the emergency thing, you really get panicky or whatever, there's a cartridge here that will not trigger by water presence. It triggers because you pull this lever. When you do pull it, you just look at $25 out the window, because these cartridges are fairly expensive. It's a CO2 cartridge, but push comes to shove, you can always, you peel this out of the jacket. You see this? This is the blown up this vest, and it's like I did it in about five breaths.
I would pull it.
$25 on your own.
Yeah.
Well, if you have time, I mean, it's like, so this is what, you see how this, you would just pull this out, If you pull the gas, it's going to do this for you. But I would not buy the ones that are automatic. A lot of the party boaters will have an automatic because you get some people who might panic. They go in the water and boom, they'll actually inflate automatically. And it's a sensing device. When it hits water, it charges that. And then there's a whistle. It's advised to have a whistle. If you were in a foggy, you flip over, someone can hear a whistle right away. Okay, another thing to show you is, and I know David is faithful with this. This is a skirt. Another thing you can see, we need to stimulate the economy here. This is a skirt which you step into, and it's made with a little bit of a bow so it keeps water out. But you're going to, when you step into the boat, you sit down, and this is oftentimes not easy, and I'm not going to set it all up. I'll just leave it there. But it's made, again, it's matched to the boat. It's made to hook onto the back fairing here. There's a hole right there, and these are actually straps that go over your shoulders. And once you get it started, and you have a release handle here, you're going to pull that up. I'll put it on so, and when you're going to use this is when I keep it in my boat. I don't always put it on if it's a mild day, there's no wind. It's something to have with you and maybe not implement, but it's a little bit of a pain to get it on. But that's on. This is a hole here. You're going to cinch that around your chest, and it's basically going to keep water from, as it blows in, if it's getting choppy and windy, water is going to come in and it's going to roll off and not go into your cockpit. I have never rolled a kayak, and I don't think I'll take the time to learn. I'm just going to bail out. So that's a good introduction because, well, the other thing that I always carry is a rope or a line if you're in the sailing world. And there's not a lot of places to tie this down, but I usually keep one in here. There have been times when someone gets in trouble, and if you have a line, you can tie this line to that boat and kind of guide them to shore or help them tow them to shore. That's happened to us in the past. So the next thing I wanted to cover is, and this will be the final thing as we hit 7 o'clock, if you do roll over and you're way out, you've gone, instead of following the shore, you've decided to cut right across this 2-mile lake, and for some reason you aren't paying attention and bloop, you're in the water. The kayak is turned over. You don't have a skirt. You have a skirt here, which you didn't bother to put on. But now, what you have is your next level of safety, and it's hard to demonstrate this, but you don't disconnect it. You keep everything tethered, and you're in the water. The boat has turned over. So the first thing you can do is to get it right, but it's going to be full of water. The cockpit's going to be full of water. If you have another boat with you, it's very possible that you could arrange with them to steady your boat. And Dave, you could maybe comment on some of this too. Or if you're by yourself, and actually there is another technique. You can do a kayak over kayak recovery. So if you had another boat, they could paddle up to the end of your kayak and then you would turn it over so the cockpit is down, and then lift the bow out of the water, and you would slide that over your boat, hold it as it drains, and then you would turn it right side up and you would slide it back. And then the thing is, that person would have to, you'd have to sit here. Oh, there goes. You'd have to be in your kayak, and you'd have to hold that kayak steady enough so they could horse themselves up and get back into the cockpit. And that's not easy. So plan B would be bend over and kiss your ass goodbye. Or plan C would be, remember what the old captain said, you have your tethered paddle now, so you haven't lost your paddle. Position yourself facing the stern of the boat. And the first thing you need to do is, what you might do is move this tether. You can work around it, and you might not bother doing that, but you could move your tether, but slide your paddle, you're facing the stern, slide it under these straps, and I'll ask you to come up. I can just do this with one of these. And this boat, you may not realize it. Who has this boat? Did you realize you have a slot in the back platform to accommodate this paddle, just as I've done it? When you get home, take a look at it. But you've set up your paddle this way. Now you reach into your bag of tricks, and you take out this safety device, which you've paid LL Bean for, again, another probably $80. You see that it opens up, and that slides over the end, and what you're doing is you're making a pontoon. You hook this together. You have to undo it. You undo it. Now, you have created for yourself a balancing point and a pontoon, which is going to keep your boat level in the water when you try to get back in. And you could probably just do this and maybe try to get up and roll in. Although your kit also includes a geyser strap. So if you're not agile enough to just, kick a couple times and roll into the cockpit, this I've made, it's about 8 feet long. Well, it's 16 feet. Okay, so now you're in the boat. What you're going to do is you're going to put one end of this loop over the other side of the paddle. You're going to drop this into the water, reach down, pull it under, and actually I should have just kept this over there. I'm going to put this over here for now. And I'm pull this tight, and I'm going to wrap this around. You have to do this enough. This is maybe a little bit too long. But you're going to have this hanging down in the water, maybe that much. And you've created a foot strap for you to, you now have a balancing point. If someone could hold this kind of maybe for me. I'm not going to do this, but if you just keep it kind of level. As you push down, that's going to prevent that from going to the water. You're going to put your right foot into here, and you're going to step down. This is going to all tighten together, and as you do that, you're going to lift yourself out, and you're going to, facing the stern, you're going to put your left leg into the cockpit. And then you're going to roll over and sit in it and bring your other leg up into the cockpit. And then you can just leave that. You're still floating in water. You take this out and start pumping. Okay, so if Alice flipped over, I would paddle up to her, and she would be getting her kayak pointed 90 degrees to here, sorry. And what you need to do is turn it over so you're going to spill water from the cockpit.
So the bow is up on top of,
Yeah,
it's being held on by this other person.
yeah, they're going to have to help.
Okay.
And so this would be me sitting here without tipping over, and Alice helping. And there may be an airlock. With a canoe, there's a tremendous airlock. In other words, as you try to pick the boat up out of the water, you won't be able to do it. You have to kind of roll it just enough so air will get in, and it'll break the seal, and then you can pull the bow up, and you would slide it, and the two of you would slide it over, and hopefully it's not draining into your cockpit, but it probably would, but you would be pumping it. And then you would roll it over and slide it cockpit up back into the water. You still have to get back into it, though. I guess what I was suggesting is maybe you would, if this is the submerged kayak, the other kayak could come alongside and just physically hold that in place, and even start pumping or help them get up. Any way they can get up, they get their leg over, and you could grab their belt and flop them in. So I took photos at several spots that I kind of investigated that could prove to be good access points, reasonable access points, and give someone a chance to explore an area and get back to that site before the tide disappears and you're wading in mud up to your knees.
And losing your shoes.
Losing your shoes. So this is a proposal, and I just have to have a caution that you have to kind of experiment and make sure that what I'm saying does work for you and your timetable. But the thing I've discovered is that, and it's a matter of opinion, I've always felt that our tide here in Taunton is at least an hour and maybe even an hour and a half later than the Bar Harbor tide. So to make it simple, I did some sampling, and I based it on the Bar Harbor time. And you can go to a chart. You can even have it in your phone and look it up before you launch. So I'm going to reference that as a window of opportunity where you have water to float, and you're going to avoid wading in the mud, hopefully. So I think the water levels will hold, but you have to be cautious. You have to be aware that high tide is going to vary through the month, and the different areas will perform differently than what I'm kind of proposing here. This is Taunton Bay, and I'm going to talk first about the Franklin Town Hall. And I'll show you some photos that I took. This was an afternoon in which Bar Harbor high tide was at 3:20. So with Bar Harbor at 320, I'm going to show you the put-in and the site for the Franklin Town Hall. I'm going to then drive around and I'm going to show you photographs, and this is Card Mill Stream. This is Route 200, Hog Bay Road. And circling around, I went up to, we're here now, this is Gordon's Wharf. And then drove down here to Carrying Place. So you'll get a chance to see within about 40 minutes what the water looks like about at Bar Harbor high tide. So this is Franklin Town Hall right there. And this is looking, the town hall, the white building's on the right. There's a big field. Look for the play structures. And walking down, they have picnic tables. And you're looking out here at Buckskin Island. This is off of Shipyard Point here, and Dwelly Point would be off to the right. Oh, okay, and then this is actually the put-in at water level, and it's at the far end of that field. And I think this tree is just temporary. We'll get that cleared out of there. But you're looking at this part of Taunton Bay right there. This is Dwelly Point. This is the town hall. And what you would have access to is water is still coming up. It's Bar Harbor high tide has yet to surpass 320. It's probably going to be 420 and maybe even 5 o'clock, right? So you're going to have a good, and if you could have come, maybe experimented, let's go here 2 hours before, or an hour before Bar Harbor high tide, and you'd find that you have 2 hours to play around all of this area. You could go into Hog Bay. You could go up, there's an eagle's nest. This is Dwelly Point, Hardison Point, Springer Creek. There's an eagle's nest right here if you want to explore that. You could go follow the channel down here, come around, and come back and do a nice about 3 hour paddle and still have water. And I've gone back and I can assure you that 3 hours, if you start an hour before Bar Harbor high tide, you're going to have an hour and a half building. There'll be a slack period, and then there'll be another hour and a half or so to where it is right now. So this was basically about 3:30. This was Bar Harbor time, and it was full. It was still coming up. It was still coming up. Now the next point that you have access, kind of public access, is here at Card Mill Stream. Looking at that, it's right there. And again, when I took the picture, this to the right this is the right of the bridge as you're driving down Hog Bay. You look to the right. That's a very pretty paddle. It's beautiful going in there. And then the Brojohn's pottery place is right there after the bridge. So the bridge is I'm on the bridge looking into the bay, into Taunton Bay. If you look to the left of the bridge, there's a little path, and it drops down into the water, and this is a fairly deep spot. It's not luxurious access point at all, but it is available, and it stays deep enough to get in and out. This is fairly limited. One thing that we're working with Don Carter on the comprehensive plan for Franklin, and she's bought into the idea, well, what can we do to make these access points more accessible? And maybe there might be some work that we could do down the road for access.
Is there parking there?
There is a fairly long wide area for parking.
4 or 5.
The University Falls on Monday. Monday night,
Yeah.
So this is the Cardinal Stream, and once you put in there, if you choose, you would have access. I personally would still go back to the town hall because you could do a nice trip in there, and you're known. It's not as difficult as it would be getting in and out there. So the next spot,
Is this for canoe and kayak or just kayak?
both. Yeah, you could do both. Yeah, it does get windy though. I have to warn you.
Yeah, halfway, very good.
Yeah, canoeing could be a challenge.
Yeah, I was.
So remember, we kept going around to our location here. This is Gordon's Wharf, and recently the town of Sullivan has put the dock in the water, so you could actually walk a boat out on there, plop it in, and go from there. It was pretty convenient. If you're uncomfortable staging from the dock, and I probably would prefer this route, but this is the stone sculpture, and if you look behind that, there's another access, and it opens up very nicely. This is a good access point. It gets a little bit muddy as you go out at lower tide, but again, this was about Bar Harbor, high tide 3:20. This was still filling at about 3:45. And if I were here an hour earlier, I mean, this is going to be deep all the time. You can get in and out of here, low tide, high tide. There's no problem with that.
Good gravel base.
No, it just starts, but gets muddy, and there's a lot of rockweed, but you can keep your feet out of the mud. The thing I wanted to mention about doing this trip, starting a trip from the town hall, would be doing in reverse what we've done with our family and the Down East Outing Club several times. You could put in here at maybe an hour or so a couple hours before high tide. You could explore all through here and then head for Gordon's Wharf, leaving a car for a shuttle back up to and there's plenty of parking there. There's no problem. There's a nice place to, you have to carry your boat across that field into the water. But just park a car down here at, this is Gordon's Wharf here. Drive around on Route 200, or there's Taunton Bay Shore Road that comes down. Pick up when you arrive here, just drive back up, get your vehicles, and come back. And you're guaranteed to always have access without mud and without running into low tide. So a trip that we've done several times is in reverse. The outing club, Down East Outing Club, plans a trip. We leave here about 10 in the morning, and we ride the incoming tide all up. It's about 6 miles, and we sometimes go out around Bering Island and up here along the shore. And we live on Dwelly Point, so we'll park the boats here, walk up to our house, have lunch, and by that time we've hit slack tide and it's actually heading out. So we'll come back, get in the boats and paddle, and we'll ride the outgoing tide back down here to Gordon's Wharf.
How fast is that current approximately?
Oh, it moves.
Like 3 or 4 miles an hour?
Oh, even more than that. Jerry, you might know. I bet it's,
Pretty good speed.
yeah. The thing is, it never fails. You've ridden the current up here. You're there in no time, maybe an hour and a half or so. We're up at the end of the bay. Had lunch, and then the wind picks up. So you basically balance out what the tide is helping you with a wind. So you're still working to get back home, but it's a pretty nice arrangement.
So do we need to call for reservations for lunch?
Yeah.
You need to join the outing club. That would.
We can do it sometime for the small
So that was from Gordon's Wharf. That's a trip that we've done, and the Dorseys had been doing it before we did it. The Dorseys live on Shipyard Point, and it's the other side of Buckskin Island. That's Shipyard Point, and for your information, there's over 100 three-masted schooners that have been built there at Shipyard Point and sailed or towed out through tidal falls to the ocean, and they've even earlier there was a big granite cobblestone business, and right here that display will be very informative if you haven't seen it. There are a number, I don't know how many, 16 quarries or so up in this part of all through here, and they were loading ships that took cobblestones to Boston, New York, Philadelphia.
So is that really deep out there?
That's the deepest point in the bay. Back in here is 70 feet deep.
Okay.
It's amazing, and that will.
So even though it's a mud flat, a lot of the time.
The rest is that will always have water. This deep channel is always there. It's deepest here. It'll get very shallow, but you can always get through there, pretty much. And then Dwelly Point, as you can see, is a fairly it holds its. It gets muddy, but it's not a very long walk to get into some deep enough water. But those are private, and the Shipyard Points, that's a private residence. So you just can't, park on the point, and you might get hassled. And then starting at Gordon's Wharf, if you take a hard left and head under the bridge, you could be at half tide. That's like probably a class 6 rapids. So this is a photo of the bridge over Carrying Place. And this was Bar Harbor, 3:20 afternoon. And this was about 4 o'clock. So there was plenty of water still in here. And there's a very good put-in. If you turn out here, there's a place to park. This is a gravelly, a nice, not very muddy spot to put in. And there was plenty of water. And that was looking toward Bering Island, or toward the bay there. So if you want to experiment, again, if you pick the high tide, this was about 4 o'clock. And I came back 2 hours later for 6, 7. We went to the Hancock, the Montreux concert, and I said, Alice, I want to just check that before we go home. We swung by, and there was still water there. And I just checked it one other time, and I could see that a couple hours after the Bar Harbor high tide, the water had dropped about 6 inches. It was a good, clean mark. And then very quickly, I went back about an hour later, and it dropped a good foot. So it does drop quickly. It does drop very quickly. When they moved the big ships through Tidal Falls, they would wait for a full, maybe even a super king tide.
New
moon, yeah. When the moon and the sun are lined up and they're causing the greatest tide flow, and they would actually, tow, they would time it, and they would hope for the right wind. And if they couldn't, they'd have to wait sometimes a whole month before they could get a boat out back to open ocean. And the thing is, as Jerry was saying, there is also slack at the lowest tide, because the tide's finished changing and now it's coming back in. It's surging back in. Any more questions? Okay, I think I've exhausted all of my wealth of trivia. Thank you.